Hello and welcome to a University of Calgary webinar, Why Build Universities as Global Intellectual Hubs. My name is Jennifer Alford and I'll be guiding you through the webinar today, and we're going to meet the panelists in just a minute. But first, a tiny bit of housekeeping. As we go, please feel free to submit questions and we will get to as many questions as we can over the course of the next hour. So let us have them. And also we have a resource list that you'll see as we go that has a whole bunch of University of Calgary documents that can help you dig into more about the international strategy, the academic strategy, the IPI strategy. So that's all available to you as we go as well. And at the end of the webinar, we'd ask you to take a minute or two and just give us a little bit of feedback on what you thought of the webinar so that we can take that and do and fold that into our next webinar. So that's the housekeeping. Now let's introduce the panelists who will be speaking today. First off is Dr. Drew Marshall, who is the University of Calgary's Provost and Vice President Academic since 2011. Hello. Hi. And next to Drew, we have Dr. Janica Ruunpura, who is the University of Calgary's Vice Provost International. Hello. And I understand you have a big flight tonight to India that we'll talk about again in a minute, maybe.
Absolutely.
Dr. Leslie Rigg is the Dean of Faculty of Science. Hello. Hi. And Will Bui is a alumni of the University of Calgary. He studied economics here. Hi, Will. Hi. And Will is now working at a software company here based in Calgary, and he traveled to Korea while a student. So we look forward to hearing more about that. But first of all, we are going to get to a poll question. We just want to get a little sense of who it is we are talking to today. So you'll see there we've got a couple of questions just to find out a little bit more about you, our listeners and participants here in the webinar. So tell us about yourself. Are you a student? Do you work at the University of Calgary? Do you work in higher education or another related area? Or maybe you don't work in higher education, but you do work in an international sphere. Or maybe you're just someone in the community who's interested in the topic. We'll give you a minute now to let us know who you are so that we understand who it is that is there, because we're all sitting in this boardroom. Okay, now here we have some answers. So we have, so far we have 0% students. We have about 53% of our participants who work here at the University of Calgary, 20% who work in higher education or a related area, 20% who don't work in higher education but do international work, and 6.7%, I'm not quite sure what this 0.7% looks like, who are community members just interested in the topic. So thank you all for taking part in that. And we have another quick question for you all that should be very, very quick for you to answer. Do you think it's important for universities to be global hubs? Yes or no? That's a simple one for the participants to answer, and I suspect if people are listening in, they're going to answer yes, 100% yes. Yeah. So there we have it. Now we are going to dig into all manner of topics and personal experiences in internationalization and institutional initiatives with internationalization, but we thought it might be good to start with a big general question. Given everything that's going on in the world, we want to ask you all, starting with you, Drew, why is internationalization important now?
Well, thanks, Jennifer. It's a really interesting question, and I think where we see trends around the world for increased nationalism and protectionism, things like we see Make America Great Again, the rise of Brexit, some of the things even that are happening in China right now. Even more important when we think of the complexity of challenges that we see in the world today, important to bring multiple perspectives to issues. And so globalization, internationalization becomes really important, and universities have the capability of being conveners and have the ability to lead some of those conversations by bringing people together around particular issues.
Yeah. Janica, what do you think?
Well, I want to add to that what Drew indicated, but also to say that the top universities really need to connect with around the world to give world-class education to our students, giving an atmosphere so that they understand beyond what we provide through locally, so that they can get a sense about what the world is about, the global perspectives and cross-cultural components. And also when you look at where we are, particularly in Calgary, when we have a name to be the top North American city by the Economist magazine, and then with a very high number of ethnicities in the city, it gives a great opportunity for our students and our faculty and everybody to see what the world is about, with the challenges that the world has, and see how they can actually contribute towards that.
Right. Leslie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, to springboard off of what's already been said, when we think about issues, they're global, the global economy, global conflict. And while we can all admit that globalization is something that's inevitable, I think being international or internationalization at a university is something that we do deliberately. And as the provost already said, we do it because we have a responsibility to create a workforce and a talent pool that is internationally relevant. And I think it hasn't ever been as relevant as it is today.
Right, there's so much going on. I mean, we've sort of coasted for decades maybe, just taking all sorts of stuff for granted that we can't take for granted anymore. Will, what are your thoughts on why internationalization is important now?
To add on to what was just said, as an alumni, for me, internationalization is very important. Because the jobs are international. The labor markets now are the globe, and as from the point of view of my employer, the people that they're hiring are from everywhere. If you want access to the skill base that you need, you have to be looking everywhere.
Yes, fair enough. It is definitely a very big world out there with all kinds of things happening. Now, before we get into a little bit more about what the university is doing, I think it's important to ask you all about your own personal experiences and connections with internationalization. Now, Drew, I know you saw a lot of the world through sport, right?
Right. I used to coach the national field hockey team, and so I've traveled all over the world. That was a real eye-opening experience, I will say, recognizing that people from different countries and cultures think differently, act differently, even in the same around the same issues. And so I think that was important both for our coaching staff and for the athletes that were involved in all the games that we participated in. But it was eye-opening that even the same action in a different culture could mean different things. And so really important to understand cross-cultural competencies. And of course, as a senior leader at a university now, I get a real opportunity to create frameworks and collaborative partnerships that help to facilitate our professors and our students in developing those understandings and creating opportunities for all kinds of great things to happen.
And how does, your athletes, what did they come home with, do you think?
Well, being an educator, we always took an educative approach. So prior to going to a new country, the athletes, there were different athletes that had to research different parts of culture, what the country was known for, what the tourism industry was like, what we should go see while we were there if we had time. And so it was a real educational opportunity.
There was a lot of stuff off the field that
you
they learned. Right. Jonica, what about you? Tell us your story.
Jennifer, so I divide my personal connections in three phases. Phase one is that I was born and raised in Colombo, Sri Lanka. So I came to the United States and to Canada as an international student. So I had brilliant experience at Arizona State University and then at the University of Alberta, tremendous institutions that value internationalization, and I had great experience. Then what I call my first 11 years as an academic member at the University of Calgary, where I got a chance to connect with various aspects of internationalization in terms of teaching, research, some of the projects that we did with students around the world. And I think I was really blessed that we have an institution that provides that ecosystem for faculty members like ourselves to get engaged with international projects. And then of course, the last one in 2013, when I, thanks to the university, and then of course this provost who is, really keen on enhancing internationalization, I became the vice provost international of the University of Calgary. Where I had a chance to lead the internationalization for the campus and to implement the international strategy with the support of campus community and the external community.
So from international student to overseeing how to help other international students along with other things. Yeah. Quite
Lots
a journey.
of great stories I remember from
Maybe if we have time later. Leslie, what is your experience with internationalization, your personal experience?
So my journey might be a little bit different. I started off, I was born in England and then grew up in Canada, and I have a number of international experiences as a student as well. I was an international student in the States and then in Australia for my PhD. But before I even came to university, I started my original career as a flight attendant. And I remember looking out the window from 36,000 feet day after day, looking at the landscape below me and just seeing unbelievable similarities all across the globe. You know, a dried riverbed in Australia is the same as a dried riverbed leading into the Sahara. And so those processes and those patterns that I was seeing just sparked my curiosity. And I remember the day I landed back in Toronto after being a flight attendant for a year was the day I enrolled in university, and I've never left. And so for me, the whole notion of internationalization is what creates interest, discovery, curiosity. It's getting out there and experiencing what the world has to offer. And I have to say that my field work as a researcher was international. I traveled to lots of countries, and what that enables the researcher to do is to bring those examples back to the classroom, and then your classroom is a better place because of it.
Fair enough. Okay, Will, over to you. You went to Korea.
I did, yes. Before I did a degree in economics, I did a degree in geography. Because I've always had an interest in other parts of the world. And, you know, it started simple enough. One day I was just having drinks with a friend, and he asked me if I wanted to go to Korea with him. And I just said yes. And I think a few months later, I find myself doing 1 semester at Korea University in Seoul. And, you know, it is one of the most formative times of my life. You know, I met new people. Some of them are still very good friends of mine. I learned a lot of things from a different perspective I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't gone abroad. And
you bonded over those experiences that you had.
I really did, yeah. And, you know, I liked it so much that when I came back from Korea, I did 2 more geography field schools.
Where were those ones?
The first one was in Europe. So we actually got to travel to Eastern Europe, someplace I never would have gone without a university field school. I saw the Ukraine before what happened a few years back.
Before Russia invaded.
Before Russia, yeah. And I got to see the Balkans. You know, that was really interesting to see because we had learned so much about the Balkan War. We could see it firsthand with an instructor there to help us interpret what was going on. And after that, we also went to go see Asia. It was a field school on urbanization in Asia. And I really got to see China really on its way up to being what it is now, the rapid development, which I saw was really interesting to compare with the semester I spent in Korea, which also had a period of rapid development. So it was a few years of really deep learning, making friends, and making memories.
I sure hope you bought your friend drinks, the one who suggested that you go to Korea, because it sounds like it was a pretty life-altering experience. Okay, so we have a little sense now of everybody's personal story with this. Let's go macro now, and let's talk about, we'll start with you, Drew. What defines a global intellectual hub?
Well, thanks for that, Jennifer. I think this is a really important question that was seminal to the development of our international strategy, actually, and was one of the primary goals. A global intellectual hub would place the university as a convener for multiple different kinds of discussions. It's a place where people of all kinds of backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures can come together to dialogue and debate about a variety of different issues. We meet for a variety of purposes. In some cases, it's to solve complex, sticky, wicked problems. In other cases, it's to open conversations on difficult subjects that can't happen in other places. In some cases, it's just to come together to celebrate differences, depending on really what we want to talk about. But I generally think that global intellectual hubs are talent magnets. Mm-hmm. You recruit people to come, whether they stay permanently or there for a short time or only there for a visit. They come to share ideas in a deep and meaningful way.
Fair enough. Okay. Janica, over to you.
Well, I think Drew explained very clearly about, in a great perspective on that. I mean, I just want to add that if you look at universities, we have various members of the university, so students, staff, and faculty. How do they get engaged in different things? How do we provide experiences for other students to see the international world? How do we create an inclusive environment for international students and so that they can engage with our students in our campus? Providing our faculty members the opportunity to see problems beyond Canada. Mm-hmm. So they engage with faculty members from other countries. They get to see new problems, new opportunities. At the same time, serving the society. Some of the countries where they may not have resources and support and expertise, and how we can develop mutually beneficial opportunities so that our faculty members and students can participate in dealing with some of the global issues, where especially in developing countries, in low and middle income countries, where provide that expertise so that they learn from each other, and so that we will have a campus that we are very proud of that and say, hey, our students, faculty, and staff engage in various activities, so that becomes globally influential.
Leslie, just 1 second here, because we just had a question come in asking sort of what you were just talking about, Janica. How does the University of Calgary encourage staff and faculty to participate in international activities?
So this is where I think I really value what we did in 2012 and 2013 by having an institutional international strategy, so that as a strategy now both at the institutional level, which is passed through our academic senate called the General Faculties Council, so that we have a strategy that clearly identified 4 goals. And one of them is, enhancing diversity. Second one is increasing cross-cultural competencies. Third one is developing educational and research partnerships. And the fourth one is leveraging our expertise on international development. Then we created a sort of an infrastructure to support with campus community members, students, faculty, and staff to engage in doing that, including opportunities, creating new projects, maybe some funding opportunities, right?
We created some funding
opportunities, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And also we also recognize the leaders. We have internationalization awards to support people who have done some work. So it's a whole cycle of things that I can think of with that, and also to find the right partners. Right. So that they could actually, partner and develop mutually beneficial relationships and projects. I can go into some examples, but
we'll get around the table, and I know that some of our resource links might answer some of those questions. But, okay, so Leslie, from your perspective, what defines a global intellectual hub?
I think that what Janica was just talking to, that notion of support, that if we have provided a welcoming environment to the students when they arrive, for our international students, if we provide an environment that supports students here to travel somewhere else to learn, and the same for faculty and staff, that it's that support, it's that recognition, it's that understanding that if we take the word intellectual out of that, or concentrate on that term intellectual, the best universities in the world are those that are globally connected. And so it's those intellectual connections that we support and foster, and I think it's through the mechanisms that Janica just described.
Okay, and Will, I guess you're like one of the spokes of that hub, huh?
Yeah. For me, an internet, a global intellectual hub is a place where not only do we bring people together, but we take their ideas, we combine them, we spend a lot of late nights, and we debate and discuss with people from all around the world, and we generate new ideas. And then they're dispersed. And the university campus is fantastic for this, as it is about just that. For me, the most clear example of, an ideal intellectual hub is some of my experiences in Korea, where I would have a professor, a Korean professor who went to school in England, tell us, classroom students, a third Korean, a third European, and a third from everywhere else, about what Marxism meant to him. And then having people debate that. And they were fierce debates because you had somebody, Chinese students debating with Ukrainian students, debating with Canadians. And everybody, I felt, after we calmed down, learned a lot and had new ideas and then took that back home with them. And to me, that is what a global intellectual hub looks like ideally.
Drew, what is the University of Calgary doing to become a global intellectual hub? What are some of the examples of it happening?
Well, you know, I think Janica talked about our strategy, and there are a variety of things underneath that strategy that are being done to actually do this. But I would say, first and foremost, we recruit talented scholars at all levels. So we recruit, first of all, professors and instructors who have an international understanding and a global awareness. And we recruit a particular type of student, I think, is attracted to come here because of the strategies that we've put in place and the kinds of things that we're doing. That's the first ingredient when we talk about being a talent magnet, to get people of a mindset that are open-minded to differences, that are open-minded to celebrate those differences and not try to assimilate them into a common frame. Maintenance of those differences is really important when we talk about diversity. And when you have diverse workforces and you have diverse ideas, you're going to get better solutions to problems.
We've just got a question that's come in that's asking, sort of along those lines, how does university globalization strategy cover innovation and entrepreneurship development?
Well, really interesting question, because of course the University of Calgary also has a really important initiative through our Hunter Hub, which was able to come into existence from a wonderful donation from the Hunter family. But that is from our last strategic vision exercise, was one of the things that got added, that we should be more entrepreneurial and focused. And there are a variety of things that we're doing, from academic programming, but I would say significant numbers of things in the co-curricular space, both at the professoriate level, at the student level, where people are brought together around different ideas. We have all kinds of opportunities in social entrepreneurship. I was just looking at a potential agreement with the European Union on an entrepreneurial opportunity between students in Europe and students at the University of Calgary, which would be really fantastic if we could get it over the line. So there are a variety of schools right now that I think are thinking entrepreneurial. Takes a particular type of university to do that. I think the University of Calgary is a young, dynamic school, not so steeped in policy and history and tradition, that would allow us to move very quickly into this space. And so that's exactly what we're doing.
Janica, do you have some examples of what we're doing that you wanted to share with us?
I'll illustrate about a couple of examples, particularly related to students, and I'll talk about the faculty one later. In terms of a diversity perspective, I think, during the last 5 years, we launched a new program called Articulation Program, so that the students from an international country can study at the University of Calgary after they complete part of the program, and then they can get a dual degree. Imagine a resume for a student having 12 degrees, one from their home institution in the international country and one from the University of Calgary. In terms of supporting our students going abroad, we're actually quite proud to say that roughly about 1,200 students annually travel to other destinations for study purposes. Because of the strategy, in 2015, we looked at how much funding do we put around them to go abroad. It was $400,000. And we managed, again, thanks to the pros, we managed to elevate that fund to about $1 million, so that we actually provided more funding opportunities for our students in an economy that actually is not doing that well, so that they can actually embark on those opportunities. And we have seen numbers where more students are interested, more students have taken the travel grants, and that actually really helps us to go to other destinations. But not only that, we also provided opportunities for young professors, like tenure-track assistant professors, connected to our research team so that they can engage with new opportunities with a foreign international country and partner. We provided some seed grants. We did the same thing for our staff, so that actually by doing it, they got a chance to engage with other international countries. I mean, there are lots of examples with related to students and staff and faculty that we are engaged, and they have actually been very good in providing their support towards the international country, as well as learning from visiting an international country and a partner institution.
Leslie, do you have some examples from the faculty level of things that are going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's everything from what Will described in terms of the group studies trips to Southeast Asia and Europe and other locations, to very specific examples. One on the entrepreneurial side, we had a group from the business school and from the Faculty of Science invited to a hackathon in the Vatican. And so our students were invited along with Ivy League schools from the States, and we won. And so I think that it's those exposures that students get to these unbelievable experiences. But even more, if students can't go out and so can't have that international experience, there's still other ways to bring the international experience into the classroom. And in the Faculty of Science, we have a program that we've just developed called I at Home, so International at Home. And we're collaborating with, for example, a university in Beijing. And so the university in Beijing and our students here in physics at the University of Calgary both work together to operate the telescope remotely that we have at the Losny Observatory. And so they're working on these celestial observations together as teams. And yet one team is in China and one team is in Calgary. And so it's these kinds of exceptional experiences that really develop the university as an intellectual hub. I have one last example that I just wanted. We haven't really talked about outreach from the university and how we can connect our future students with the notion of being international. And there's a program that we have, it's a global, or that we take part in, it's a global program called Technovation. And this is teams of girls from junior high and high school who work with our professors and with industry partners, and they get a global problem, and they create an app that works towards solving that global problem, and then they compete globally. And in August, in the States down at Googleplex, there's the global competition. So you have groups of girls from all over the world competing in this huge Technovation challenge. And so those are our future students. And so by developing them in high school and in junior high, we're going to be getting a talent pool that's ready to go and ready to be international.
And that was developed by an alumni, right?
One of our alumna, Anar Simpson, is the global ambassador for Technovation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she's involved in that.
Yeah.
So, Will, I mean, you've graduated from the University of Calgary, but do you have any thoughts on what the university could do to sort of further its global intellectual hubness?
I think the universities are doing a fantastic job at that experience. There are centers here that are with volunteers who are very eager to help you go international, go abroad. We'll help you out with all the grants that are available to you. What more could be done? I would say, bring more students here, actually. I think the University of Calgary is a great place, and I would love a large proportion of international students to come here. When I went to Korea University, they had a program where a third of their courses would be taught in English, and I would say almost that much were international students on campus. And it really changed the experience for the Korean students there. And I think that we could do something similar here. And it'd be, for students who don't have to go, a great way to get international experience without having to actually buy a plane ticket. That's one thing.
Good suggestion. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how internationalization can help faculty members solve big challenges. I don't know if we want to go around the table or if I just want to ask Leslie.
I can certainly jump in. I think one of the most amazing things that our faculty work with is the notion that most of what they're working on is global in nature. So when we think about water, water knows no boundaries. And, you know, one example that I can give, in the Pacific Ocean, we have the Banfield Marine Science Center on Vancouver Island. It's a 5-university consortium. But that consortium of universities is also working with other universities around the Pacific Rim, because DNA doesn't stop on the coast of Canada. So there's a DNA barcoding project that's going on Pan-Pacific. You know, other opportunities that our faculty members have, we wouldn't be able to do some of the research that we do if it wasn't for international collaborations. So CERN, a large accelerator in Europe, we have faculty members who work there. If they didn't work there and they weren't collaborating on international groups, we wouldn't be doing the groundbreaking research that we're doing. And so I think that internationalization doesn't just help faculty members solve big problems, it's actually an avenue to solving big problems.
Danica? Yes.
I mean, Drew and I should jointly talk about this one. When we developed the international strategy, we also identified priority countries. And so one of the great examples that we can elaborate is on Mexico. Drew actually, as the provost, chairs our Mexico Regional Advisory Council. So we have a council with faculty members, members from the industry community, students that are in the council, and one of the projects strategic projects that we developed with the Ministry of Energy in Mexico. And when they visited us in 2014 after their energy reform, we proposed a concept called Global Research Initiative on Energy. That provided an opportunity for our faculty members to engage with faculty members from Mexico and various, universities and organizations. The outcome was that in 2017, that we managed to secure 647 million pesos, which is $46 million from the Ministry of Energy from Mexico to this 20. We have 21 projects, and it's a brilliant example about strategic perspective. Universities supporting them, getting the faculty members engaged, and then they bid to get these projects. And I'm so happy to say that those projects are doing really well, and we are contributing that. I think Drew can, Drew led that project, so Drew understands.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would just add to Janica that we haven't talked about at all is the importance to industry connection. And so part of our international strategy and our country strategy, I'll just say a few words maybe about the country strategy. We did that. We chose 6 countries for our strategy, and those countries were picked very selectively. They were picked on the basis of research that we had going on, but also from our research strategy where we thought countries would really resonate with the ideas that were there, where publications were being done by our scholars with comparators that were already there, where our students were coming from, and we combined that, and we said we can't be everything in the world. We can't be everywhere at one time, so where do we really want to focus? And it really was about ensuring that finite level of resources was spent appropriately and to maximize the potential for that. And we said we wanted to develop connections in those countries around research and educational areas that were important, but were mutually beneficial. And while we were really interested in connecting a Canadian institution to, as Janica has said, in one aspect, a Mexican institutions or multiple Mexican institutions, we also wanted industry partners in Calgary to connect to industry partners in Mexico. So that we could see how we might solve problems together. This was a really spectacular example of doing that, where all the pieces fell into place. We had Canadian companies involved in us that were really crucial in opening doors for us in Mexico, but who also became really, really strong partners and allies of the university, and recognized that the technology and the innovative solutions that were being developed by the scholars also were important for their industry. So it was mutually beneficial, not only with the Mexican institution, educational institution, but also with the industry partners. The exciting thing, I think, about that one, that was focused on energy. We also have a very collaborative partnership in China that is focused on energy. And I think the really exciting part of that, while the issues are slightly different. Their geography in China, for example, is different than the geography in Mexico. The issues are slightly differently. The innovations that we talk about can transfer from country to country and therefore solve global issues around energy production, about sustainable energy production, about environmental effects of energy production that are really important to solve grand challenges. So it's been exciting to be part of it and is a great example of how an international strategy and a research strategy can come together to create some exciting opportunities.
Well, we've just got a question from a participant that kind of fits here, I think. And the question is, are the various programs that are being discussed defined and delivered by the university, or is the university open to proposals from the public with ideas and or resources?
Well, this is the beauty of the way we've done things here. And I think this is a really important part. Janica talked about, the development of the international strategy. Before we finalize any strategy at the university, one of the first things we do is to develop a group of about 25 to 30 people from our downtown community and elsewhere, bring them together, present the strategy, and talk about the opportunities. The international strategy was really interesting because we had companies in the room that said, we know you've picked these countries, but actually if you pick these countries, it would be better for us. And there were some that were really close, and we could say, if it's better for you, we could actually pick that country because we have lots going on there. So there has been community input at almost every level, and we're absolutely open to discussing issues with the community.
Did you hear that, people? You may have a few emails to answer tomorrow. Will, let me ask you now, if I may, start this discussion off. What is the value of internationalization for students and society? You obviously have some very thoughtful things to say about your experience. What would you say the value is for the broader society?
Oh, so where do I begin? I want to say that for students, I've mentioned that I've made some very strong bonds studying abroad, but also, these same people work in industries that I'm interested in, and their friends and their coworkers also work in industries I'm interested in. And the network that I've created by going international is so valuable for my next job or my next, even as simple as my next tourist destination, to have friends actually show me around and give an inside perspective so I can inform my opinion of the world. And stories. One of the things that everybody seems to do nowadays is travel. And I remember as a student that it was really difficult connecting with professionals at networking events, at job interviews. But I mentioned my international experiences, and everybody's got a story. And I've got so many stories. And it was a great way to leave a great impression and get my perspective across. It was a great medium for that. So I think students really benefit from those experiences and those networks. For society, I think it's been mentioned a few times, the shared perspective is very important for our democracy, but also for businesses, right? Our company hires people from all around the world. A lot of those people that are hired are from UC students who've met people who go to other universities through an internationalization program. And so our company is really benefiting from a big pool of labor that they wouldn't have access to otherwise without these networks that were formed at the university. So those are some of the things I think really bring a lot of value.
Anyone else want to throw in a few thoughts on what internationalization, what value it brings for students and society?
Let me talk about two examples. One as an academic member. When I started my journey at the University of Calgary in 2001, I was actually quite blessed that in 2002 I got a project where in civil engineering where we have 63 students in our class, and we got finally a project was to design a portion of an largest urban renewal project in Europe. That's in Portugal, called Alta de Lisboa. So 26 students had a chance to go to Lisbon, Portugal, engaged with the developers, architects, engineers, and everybody and the community members, where they got almost all the documents in Portuguese, no English documents, and they had to deal with that with the language barrier. And they developed some good design solutions, and I'm aware that two of the solutions that they designed actually was taken by the developers in Portugal, one related to environment, one related to some structural design. And so that was actually brilliant examples that the students feel that the work that they did as finally a project being implemented in a real life project in Europe, not even Canada, outside of that. The second example is, during the last few years that we send many students for international development purposes to low and middle income countries. And when they visit the country and they come and give a report about their experiences, and I remember that two of the students who went to a hospital in a low and middle income country, and the experience that they shared about the healthcare system that the patients are facing. So now they get to compare society, values, the healthcare system here in Canada, the healthcare system in another country, the facilities, the way that certain protocols are done, so they can actually compare it and to really understand, well, there are many challenges in various countries that, how we could actually contribute and support them. How do we learn from that one? And then that actually gives those students an opportunity to understand greater values and then contribute to the society.
And I wonder too, Drew, I want to ask you specifically, when you think about internationalization and the things that are sort of coming our way, like artificial intelligence and automation, like what are some of the, how do those things kind of make internationalization even more, crucial?
Well, I think we could talk about any time period where significant disruption is occurring, and think about how and challenges are complex. Challenges typically, Leslie talked earlier about water. We talk about DNA. We talk about solutions to these very sticky problems that people are trying to get a handle on
require, first of all, typically interdisciplinary solutions. But we think, depending on your culture, you think differently about issues. And so it's not only coming from different disciplines, it's different approaches, it's different ways of thinking, different perspectives on issues. And so it's important to share things. You can see, I think about the AIDS vaccine, right? When people were trying to discover really how to solve that grand challenge, you had a team in France and a team in the States competing at the same time and sharing different results to see how they might solve a really critical issue in the world. And we can see that repeated over and over again. Technology is a great disruptor, and things are moving at a pace that we've never seen them move at before. There is knowledge that's created at a pace that we have not seen before. Data analytics allow us to do things in a way that we've not been able to do before. And so it's probably going to be even more important to be a global community that allows us to connect in a different way. Leslie, I think you have some thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that this is a digital world that we live in. We are connected like we've never been connected before. When I was an undergraduate student, I couldn't even have imagined where we are today. But the importance of what we do within the framework of artificial intelligence or automation or diagnostics, whatever it is teach our students the real life situation that's connected to the other end of that social media story or whatever it is. But beyond that, when we think about society and solutions and where we can sort of incorporate into or bring together internationalization and the digital world, I think about things like diagnostics. Meeting with a professor recently and an industry partner, and their question to us was, when can we take the diagnostics? So it's somebody's in a hospital in a remote area in Northern Ontario or in Africa or in the outback in Australia, and they don't have connection to a hospital, they don't have, or to a facility to analyze their blood sample for infection. When is diagnostics going to be something that happens outside of the physical sample. So when can we take things like artificial intelligence and make them truly global to solve the problems that we're all trying to solve? And I think that diagnostics from an infection standpoint is one example. There are so many, just so many.
And we just had a question come in that I'll ask you, Leslie. What can we do to encourage more of these sort of international scientific collaborations?
Well, I think, the good news is that we're doing it. I think having an international strategy in place, having universities, University of Calgary is one of many universities linked to so many others around the world through these networks, that it's almost a given now. When a student comes to campus, it's not, should I do an international experience, but what will my international experience be? Will it be interacting with an international student here on campus? Will I be going on a group study program? Will I have a research project? And the faculty that you see and you interact with at the university come from all over the world. And it's the ability to attract that talent that the University of Calgary has really excelled at. And so I think we're doing all the right things. I know that from my time here at the University of Calgary, just in the Faculty of Science, the number of international students that we have has doubled, the percentage of students. So it is growing. And so I would say we're doing the right thing.
And like you say, everyone who graduates is going to go out into the world, and those relationships exist that Will was talking about.
I think one of the other things that can happen is working with our provincial and federal governments to incentivize some of the behaviors, right? The Canadian government is really fantastic at this. They have all kinds of international programs that encourage us to work with other governments, right? And the Mexican government, I thought, was brilliant. They knew they had an issue. They wanted to deregulate their energy environment. It had been a Mexican monopoly, and they needed outside help to do that. They brought in regulators from around the world to do that, including Alberta regulators who are very well respected. And in terms of the type of research that was done, they know all the research that's being done in Alberta. And so they selected partners from here, from Norway, from Europe, to do different things for them. The Mexican government actually set up a program to say, we know we don't necessarily have the expertise at the Mexican institution, but we'll incent you to work with the Mexican institution and to partner with them. Their government did that.
So we've just had a question come in that is sort of an elephant in the room, I think. I'm glad that this person has asked the question. And we started initially asking about why is globalization important now. This question is, how do you keep internationalization at the forefront when other institutions and governments are closing borders?
Well, you see, and that takes us back to the starting question, doesn't it? And I think, this is a choice that universities make, but quite frankly, I think it's a moral and ethical imperative. Universities that we've talked about, the greatest universities in the world have global connections, a global network of connections because of the kinds of discovery and innovation that are occurring at them. And I think we recognize as scholars that you can't independently solve problems. The problems are too complex to solve on your own. And so you create networks to help do that.
And will those networks, like those scholarly networks that are getting bigger and better every year, will those help kind of break down some of those walls that are coming up from other institutions?
Well, we would certainly hope they would do that. But I can say there have been some government interventions that work in favor, oddly, of that. So I'll give you an example. When there were some issues in the U.S. about increasing nationalism, there were scholars in the U.S. that wanted to come to Canada. So they don't necessarily have to be Canadian bred and born. That's when Canadian institutions become talent magnets. Same thing with Brexit. There are scholars in Great Britain right now that are interested in going to other countries. This is how knowledge moves and is borderless, really. You go to places that are talent magnets, and universities can serve as conveners for that talent.
Regardless of political
boundaries. Universities, by their very nature, are meant to be apolitical.
Yeah. Did you have some thoughts, Will?
I'd like to add to that, because The question being, like, how do we keep internationalization on the forefront during this age of nationalism? And I think that internationalization can be the solution to it, because one thing that happens to students when they go abroad, step one is they have a bit of culture shock. They don't, things, up is down and down is up. But by the end of it, and I found this with myself too, you have a very clear sense of what it means to be Canadian. And when you are a Canadian somewhere else, you become much more confident in your own culture and that you have an identity and something to represent. And I think that's core at what's driving these nationalism movements. So I think that like a possible solution is to have more internationalization, send more people abroad, and let them see for themselves what it means to be a Canadian in increasingly globalizing society.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, it's very encouraging to hear all that when you read the paper every day, because it's nice to think about those sort of boundaries that are broken and connections that are made. Let's talk a little bit about UCalgary and how the internationalization has grown here at Fisk University, which, as you mentioned, Drew, is a pretty new university. Maybe you could start with that one, start taking us around the table.
It's really interesting. The University of Calgary is 52 years old, but has a very rich history and tradition in international work. When we met as an international strategy 5 or 6 years ago, when we were developing the international strategy in a relatively new way of doing it, we were amazed to find out that we had over a 30-year history in international development work in various parts of the world. And that was something that, for some reason, over about a decade, we had lost that edge. And it was important for us to recognize that history and to rebuild it, to say, this is going to be an important marker for the university, and it's going to be an important part of our DNA as an institution. And I will say we did this with some community members in Calgary, which had been, a relatively local, parochial university serving the local community. It was really important for us to open the borders. And I think the university is better for that, and so is the city of Calgary.
The city's become more international.
The city of Calgary is the third most diverse city in Canada right now. And you can walk on our campus, and I can tell you, we don't know who's an international student and who's a Calgarian. So it's important that we are able to understand cultural differences.
How many study abroad students do we have in the course of the year?
I think we have 1,200.
Roughly 1,200 students.
Who leave here to go elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is something that we're actually planning in the next 3 to 4 years to increase it by about another 300. Because, we have a target that we call it, the next target is 30%. We are at about 24% right now. We were at about 19% 6 years ago. So that's the target that we want to actually enhance sending students abroad.
I will say when we did our international strategy, we were really aspirational. We wanted 100% of our students to have an international experience of some type. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that there are barriers to some of those experiences, like finances, we put things in place to help. But in absence of people going away, as Leslie has said earlier, we can encourage people to have international experiences right here at home by bringing those experiences to them.
Another question, we've got sorry, Bill, did you want to say something about
not about that topic, but I had some thoughts from the previous question about artificial intelligence and automation.
Yeah.
I work for Solium, which is, we've automated stock options in a war. It's a very labor-intensive process, and we develop software to automate it. And one thing I've learned from working there is that, we have some of the best talent in the world right here in Canada. I don't think a lot of students really appreciate it, but in these fields, machine learning, artificial automation, where we produce some great talent. And I've heard it from the executives at my company, but also from chief technology officers who used to be in California, but they've located here to access our talent. The issue they have, though, is that the markets are somewhere else. The money and the really big problems, which are knowledge can be applied to and really generate value from are in other places. So it's so important to develop connections abroad. And universities can be one of those nodes that we generate that through. But I think, as in terms of value for society, it's so important.
Sorry about that. We just got a little cell phone. So value for society is great, value for students is great, value for human beings is great, and it builds all those connections that are good for the world.
It's really important for us to get our talent out there. It's one of the biggest challenges we have.
You guys, we just have a couple minutes left, but I want to quickly go around the table to see if there's some closing comments before we close the webinar.
Well, I want to hit on something that Will said. I think internationalization is really important. We've talked all about this, but one of the interesting offshoots of internationalization, two things actually. If you only stay in one place, you don't know what you don't know. So it's important to figure out what else there is to know. And the second thing I would say is once you find out what you don't know, you recognize how good a place Canada is. And while we want to celebrate internationalization, it's always great to say Canada is our home.
Pretty good one.
I mean, as the Vice Provost International, I'm actually so proud that I'm in an institution that we value internationalization. We provide a great strategy and ecosystem for our students and staff and faculty to enhance international connections and projects. And also, I'm so proud that we actually have a name as an award-winning institution for internationalization. So this is a wonderful institution that's committed for that, and we are committed, and we will actually engage in driving excellence in the future.
So, you know, the thing for me that's really important is that students and faculty are out there being curious. And when you go abroad or you go on an international experience or have students come here, the very first thing that we always talk about are the differences. And it's those diversity, it's that diversity of differences that leads to really creative solutions, as we've all talked about. But after we get past those differences, what we begin to see are the similarities. And it's those similarities that create the networks and bring us together and create the bonds, those stories that we can tell and those relationships that are maintained. And it's through the similarities that I think the solutions really become reality.
Will you get the last word?
Oh, what else did I add to that?
You don't have to make up words. If you've already said all your words, you've been very eloquent.
You know what? To all the students or people who might be listening, I really, from the bottom of my heart, really encourage you to go abroad. It has been one of the most, as I said, important experiences of my life, and you won't regret it. It might cost a lot. Don't worry about it. Right? Over the course of a career, it'll seem like such a steal.
Thank you. And we're out of time.
I just want to say one thing. I want to thank all of our international partners, both universities and industry partners, for the connections that have allowed us to do the kinds of things that we do.
Because we can't do it all on our own, can we?
No.
Well, thank you all very much for coming today, and thank you, participants, for dialing us up. There'll be slides, and just keep tuned because the slides and recording will follow. And as we mentioned at the beginning, there's all these resources that you can click on, all these different strategies that we've referred to over the course of the last hour, and you can dig right into those. And please take a second to fill out the survey. And please also register for the next webinar, February 19th, to talk about how to 7 steps to a successful international strategy implementation. There's the link right there. You can see it. Thank you all again for dialing us up today. My name is Jennifer Alford, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.